Are you tired of spending too much of your hard-earned money at the supermarket? Are you dreaming of farm fresh eggs, homegrown veggies, and homemade everything? Well, welcome to Ditch the Store, where we break free from supermarket dependence and take back control of our food and household essentials. I'm CJ, and I'm here to show you that life is too short for store-bought eggs. So let's get started. G'day everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ditch the Store, episode number 156 this week. Oh my goodness, where did it go? And we're talking about egg overloads. Now, on my own this week, because Handy Helper is busy working, we're both back to shift work now, which is making for interesting passing in the night kind of stuff. I've been on afternoon shifts all week and he's on day shifts and yeah. Anyway, I'm here recording and I'm going to try and batch a couple of episodes. So we've got 156 and hopefully I'll be able to record 157 as well. Now, egg overload. We have spoken about this before, but I just wanted to go back over it because there's new listeners who maybe don't want to go back through all the other episodes, but also too, there's some other things that I've thought of. So I figured it was a good time to rehash what happens when you get into egg overload. Now, for some people, you might be sitting there going, I don't understand what egg overload is. I never have a surplus of eggs. And if that's the case, that's great. I'm so glad for you. Also, too, if you haven't got chickens yet, you might be thinking, well, how would you end up with more eggs than you could use? We'll use all our eggs. You would be surprised. Sometimes the eggs can build up to the point where you think, shit, I've got no idea what I'm going to do with these. So at some point during your chicken keeping life, you will walk out into your coop and there will be so many eggs and you'll already have so many eggs inside and you'll be thinking, what do I do now? Like, I can't eat, we can't eat, 6 or 7 eggs each person, each meal for the next 3 or 4 days to try and get them back down again. You could, if you're on a carnivore diet, that'd be a great way to cull those oversupply of eggs. And I know carnies who eat like 5 eggs a day without a problem. So if you're on a carnivore diet, that would be the simplest way to get rid of your egg overload. But if you're not, I've got some other tips. So you get all your eggs inside, you've got them on the bench, you're sitting there and you go, I have no idea what to do. It's a really good problem to have. Certainly having not enough eggs is probably more of an issue than having too many eggs, but it's still a problem. So we'll try and work it out. Now, if you do have this problem, you need to make a bit of a plan and look ahead. So coming into winter, and it will depend completely on how old your birds are, but there's always going to be a lull in the laying at some point. So having those excess eggs now is really important if you want to be self-sufficient and not have to buy eggs, is to learn how to preserve or to keep those eggs so that they can be utilised when there is a lull in the laying. What we're going to talk about is how long they actually last, how you can store them, different ways of preserving them or keeping them, and how you can turn it into something else, like a little bit of money on the side or some bartering and things like that. If the girls are going hell for leather laying, there is no point wasting it. I hate waste. So before we get into that though, I want to talk about why gluts happen. So there's a couple of reasons why, and some of them are man-made and some are just nature, but there are a few simple reasons why they happen. And the first one is the spring laying bloom. So if you've got young pullets who are just starting to get into their laying cycle, they will lay at a fever pitch for the first 6 to 12 months. And you may have young pullets that you've all the same age, in which case you will have all of them laying their massive amount of eggs all in one hit. So you do find that you have, particularly with Isa Browns, where they lay 7 days a week, if you've got 10 chickens, you're going to have 70 eggs a week. So 70 eggs a week is a lot of eggs, but that's what you'll end up with. So that laying bloom will kick in usually around spring or summer. With chickens, it doesn't relate to the age of the chicken so much as the season that the chicken is in. So, and when I say season, I mean weather season. when daylight hours become longer, their laying will increase. When the daylight hours are less, their eggs will drop off. And that's why we say there's always a lull in winter. Even if you've got young chickens who are laying pretty heavily, through winter they will back off a bit because they don't have as much daylight hours. And it's like that circadian rhythm for them. It tells them to lay more eggs in summer and spring. So the laying bloom, young hens hitting their peak production. I'd put down here 5 to 6 eggs a week, but Isa Browns will lay 7 eggs a week. And some of the other birds, Australorps and things like that, will also go 7 eggs a week, like daily. Sometimes even, I remember reading somewhere that it might have been the Isa Browns, every 23 hours. So eventually you'll get to a point after, 23 days where you have 8 eggs in a week off an Isa Brown, which is a lot of eggs. Now, the other thing is too many chickens. Chicken math is a real thing. So, you get 2 and then you think, oh, but I really want 5 and that means I should get 10. And the next thing you know, you have a flock of chickens and they're all laying at the same time. It's okay. It's okay to have too many chickens. Your choices are find an outlet for your eggs, barter them with somebody, sell them. And I'll talk more about selling eggs later. There's a couple of things that have changed in the last couple of years. Or you can trade your chickens for something else. So you could go to somebody and say, look, I've got 10 chickens. I really only need 5. So I will sell you a flock of 5 all in one hit. And that's a good way of doing it if you really have too many and you just don't know what to do with them. And the last one is, for the non-carnivores out there, if your family just can't keep up with the eggs that they're producing, that's when you're going to get your gluts. Now, in our household, we are fairly heavy meat eaters. We predominantly eat a kind of keto-ish diet. So the kids do eat eggs. MJ, not so much. OJ could have 3 eggs for breakfast every day without a problem. So could the handy helper, so could I. So we certainly would go through those eggs, but not every family is like that. Some families, they'll use eggs for cakes, for cooking, for baking, things like that, but not necessarily eating for omelettes or boiled eggs or things like that. So downsize the flock if you are not keeping up with the eggs because you just don't eat that many. And that's okay. You don't have to, like nobody's forcing you. Even though I call them little vitamin bombs because let's face it, an egg is a complete food. All right, so how long do eggs actually last? So you've got your glut, the girls are all laying at the same time, can't keep up with, your consumption rate is not keeping up with your production rate. How long will they last? And people get so worked up about this. I can remember the first time I said to somebody I didn't keep my eggs in the fridge, everybody lost their mind. It was like, how could you do that? They go off, Eggs not kept in the fridge don't go off under certain circumstances. Any egg eventually is going to go off. And so there's a couple of really, really simple ways that you can check that your eggs are fresh. But what you need to understand is that just because they're not kept in the fridge, that doesn't mean they're going to go off quicker. I find, and this is just from 7 years of doing it, keeping them in a cool, dark spot in the house is the equivalent of keeping them in the fridge. But in the fridge, I notice that sometimes the shell can degrade a bit if they're in there for too long. That's why I don't keep them in the fridge. Now, we don't wash our eggs. Commercial eggs that you get from the shop are washed. They have to be for hygiene reasons. I think Listeria, I want to say Listeria, is the one that can be on the outside of an eggshell. We don't wash our eggs when we store them. We wash our eggs right before we crack them. And that way, and that's only if we're cracking them and not cooking them. Like if we're baking, I don't necessarily do it. Or if the egg is super, super clean and doesn't look like it's got any dirt on it, I might quickly crack it without washing it. But if I'm cracking it into a fry pan, and I do sometimes consume raw eggs, if I'm having a raw egg in a milkshake, I will wash the outside of it before I crack it in. The reason for that is just because sometimes there is a little bit of gunk on the outside. But I want to store it with what's called the bloom. The bloom is like a membrane. It's a liquid that's secreted by the chicken when she lays the egg. And that bloom protects the shell from taking in things from the outside atmosphere. It's like a coating. And if you wash that off, eggs will go off much quicker. And that's why I think my shelf-kept eggs survive much better than some of the store-bought ones, because they've lost that natural protection around the eggshell. So we don't wash our eggs until we're about to use them. On the bench, the recommendation is 2 to 3 weeks. I have had eggs that are 2 months old on the bench, and I have tested them before we've cracked them. And yeah, occasionally you get one that you kind of go, the yolk kind of splatters rather than stays together. Those ones go to the dogs because the dogs don't have a problem eating eggs that are slightly just about to turn. But honestly, 1.5 months to 2 months, we've had eggs that we crack and eat, and we have had no problems with them. They have not made us ill. But there is a test that you can do to make sure that they're okay before you crack them. Because let me tell you, if you crack a bad egg in the house, oh my God, the smell will take forever to get out. I have done it maybe 2 or 3 times, and now I always do this test before if I'm in any doubt about the egg's age or freshness or ability to be used. The standard recommendation for fridge storage, if you do choose to store them in the fridge, is 1 to 3 months. Like I say, keeping them in a cool, even temperatured place in the house, my eggs last 2 months, unwashed in a carton. So, yeah. But the way to tell, and this applies to any egg. This could be eggs you got from the shops. This could be eggs you get from your local farmer's market, anything like that. If you are in any way in any doubt about the freshness of the egg, it is a super simple test called the float test, and I have spoken about it before. You fill basically a cup, preferably a clear cup so that you can see, full of water, just cold water, and then you slowly place the egg into the water and you put it on the bottom of so put it all the way, submerge it all the way into the cup. If the egg bounces up and floats to the surface, do not crack that egg inside. In fact, I would take it out and I would bury it in your compost and crack it once you've got soil and other matter over the top of it. Maybe just get a shovel and give it a light tap to crack it open, because it's bad. If it floats straight to the surface, it's really bad. You don't want to crack that one inside. If it is sitting on the bottom of the glass jar, but it stands up, so it's instead of laying sideways, it goes into the elongated lengthways position in the water, that means that it's an older egg, but it's not off. As long as this doesn't float to the surface, it's not off. The thing is that there's more air in the egg now than what there should be, because it's starting to get old, in which case it's starting to head towards that not being good. The ones that float have got a lot of air inside the eggshell. The one that stands up on the bottom has a little bit of air in there, but you should still be fine. I would always crack that, and I always crack any eggs anyway, into a separate container rather than just cracking it straight into a bowl of things that I'm using or straight into the fry pan. I always crack it into a separate container anyway. If it stands up at the bottom, definitely crack it into another container and have a good look at it. The smell will tell you. If you can't smell it, it's fine. If you can smell it, I probably wouldn't use it. Fresh eggs should lay horizontal on the bottom of that container and not float in any way, shape or form. And that means there's no air inside that eggshell, and that means your egg's fine. So keep that in mind for how to test for eggs. That way, if in doubt, chuck it out. Like, it's, you know, I joke and say I've got a cast iron gut. I can't remember the last time I had food poisoning from anything. And I have travelled really extensively into some countries that would be considered third world countries. And I can't remember the last time I had food poisoning. Even when we're in Thailand with the kids, like 8 years ago, handy helper and both kids got sick. I was sick for about an hour. Like, I ran to the toilet 3 times and went, now I'm hungry and I'm fine. And the kids got over it in 24 hours. The poor old handy helper, he was sick for about 4 days. I don't get sick from food very often, but if in doubt, chuck it out. Food poisoning is just not worth it, especially if you're feeding kids. So, couple of ways that you can get rid of your glut. We'll go through. One, the obvious one, is use more eggs in your kitchen. Now, I know that sounds like no-brainer, but think about things that you can do to get rid of that glut. So, egg-heavy meals. For breakfast, you could be looking at doing a big batch of scrambled eggs for everybody. Scrambled eggs on toast is lovely. You can make omelettes, and certainly my two kids are teenagers and they're going to the gym and doing that kind of thing, and they love the idea of having an omelette for breakfast because that's what all the influencers have for breakfast. So omelettes are a good one, and you can put leftover veggies, meat, ham, bacon, whatever you want in there. And the other one is breakfast burritos. So my kids also love wraps. We don't have a lot of bread. I don't buy a lot of commercial bread in the house, but wraps they will do and take for lunches and things like that. And we've just looked at doing big batches of breakfast burritos because I'm back to shift work now, so it's a bit more tricky in the mornings. Batches of breakfast burritos that we can then just heat up in the air fryer inside foil, and the kids can chuck it in their bag and take it with them and eat it like an hour after they're up, because I'm getting them up really early in the morning when the handy helper and I are both on day shift. We get them up early, they jump in the car and they come into the gym. If I can heat up a burrito and wrap it in something that keeps it warm, when they're finished at the gym, then they can have their burrito. Most people don't like eating before they go to the gym, so that's kind of a handy way of doing it. Now, some other meals that you can do that are egg heavy and that we've certainly used in the past, and luckily everybody here likes these meals, but we've used these in the past to knock over eggs really quickly when we've got a big glut. Quiches. And quiches are great. I love quiches for the main reason that you can clean out the fridge and chuck whatever you've got in the fridge in there. If you've got leftover mushies, if you've got leftover spring onions, if you've got capsicum that's getting a bit sad, if you've got, leftover bacon or ham bits, you can chuck those in. Tomatoes might be going a bit funny. They're not as nice, when like a lot of veggies that don't look as good when they're starting to turn can still be cooked and be fine. So you can chuck things into a quiche and make a veggie meat quiche using a whole bunch of eggs. And frittatas are the other ones. Now, I love frittatas because it keeps in line with the keto stuff that I try to do. And I can put as little or as much vegetables in as I want and heaps of meat in it. So I can have a frittata that's all bacon, it's got sausage pieces in it, it's got mince in it, whatever I want. A frittata is just basically egg with other stuff baked into a dish. Now, there's another one that I haven't tried yet and I want to, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong, so I apologise for my horrible pronunciation, and that's shashuka. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's the tomato-based kind of like sauce. I think you put meat in it and veggies as well, and you crack whole eggs into it and let them bake within it. Every time I look at it, I think, God, I'd really like to make that. I haven't got around to it yet, but yeah. Now, the other thing you can do is get baking. If you are eating, if you've got kids or you've got birthdays or things coming up, make cakes. Use all your eggs making cakes. Make pavlova. You'd go through so many egg whites, and don't stress about wasting yolks because you make the pavlova with the egg whites. Keep all your egg yolks and you can make custard. Simple, win-win. Sometimes I just chuck a whole egg in the custard making anyway, but it's better with egg yolks. You could also make eggnog with your leftover yolks if you've used the egg whites. Certainly at Christmas time, that's what I tend to do is I'll make up a pavlova base, a meringue, and the egg yolks that came out of the egg whites, I'll make eggnog out of those. But sponge cakes, muffins, pancakes, anything that would require eggs to go into it, custard, pavlovas, get cracking and make all those. And if you can freeze, if there's certain things that you can freeze. MJ made banana bread the other day, which used a few eggs, and then she sliced it up into slices once it had cooled and baggied them up, and the kids have been taking them for lunches all week. They've been taking them as a snack, a piece of banana bread. Even OJ, who doesn't even like bananas, will take banana bread. Other things that you can make that, look up the recipes. There's so many recipes online now that are really quick and simple. Mayonnaise. Mayonnaise is so easy to make from scratch, and I'm trying to find a really good recipe that doesn't have any seed oil in it, because most of them have canola or olive oil in them. But it's so quick to make it out. You just drop it all in a jar and blend like crazy with a stick blender. Lemon curd's another one that requires a bit of eggs, and I already mentioned custard. So cook and use what you can, and if you can, like I say, if you can freeze things, then freeze them. And know that you've got stuff in the freezer. The breakfast burritos, making up breakfast burritos, that's the next big thing on our list, to get into a habit of doing that every second weekend kind of thing. And just, it doesn't have to be for every morning, but if we've got, 4 or 5 for each kid over a fortnight stuck in the freezer, it means that when we do have to go in early, they can just take it out, heat it up, chuck it in their bag and eat it later. Next one is preserving eggs for the lean months. Now, this is where, when you go into that lull period where they stop laying, you need to start thinking about how you're going to have eggs through that period. And depending on the chicken and depending on where you live, the lull period can go anywhere between 4 weeks and 8 to, I don't want to say 12 weeks, but if you're in a snowy environment and it's really dark and you're really up north or really down south in the world, then the light may not kick back in. And I know a lot of homesteaders who, because they live so far north or so far south, they do put artificial lights in their chicken coops, so that they can kind of start the spring happening before spring actually happens, because they try and get the light going again so that the chickens feel like the days are getting longer. And that's fair enough. I mean, you've got to let them have that break. You've got to let them have that molt period. But I understand that, you don't want chickens out of lay for 12 weeks. That's probably pushing the friendship a little. So preserving for when those periods happen. And everybody will have them. You see memes sometimes on Instagram, things like that, where it says, I'm a freeloader, mum had to buy eggs at the store, that kind of thing. It's not their fault. They go through that period, and we'll talk about molt in a little bit. But firstly, how to preserve them. So freezing is a good one. Now, freezing is not good for fried eggs, scrambled eggs, things like that, but for baking eggs, for eggs that you would be putting into quiches, for eggs that you would be putting into cakes or biscuits or breads or anything that you're making like that requires an egg in it, frozen eggs can be really handy for that. And you can freeze them as an individual egg. Usually the idea would be a large ice cube tray. So when I say large, I mean the actual ice cube bit is large so that it can contain the whole egg. You can just crack it straight in there, put it in the freezer, freeze it. Once they're all frozen, pop them out and put them in a clip seal bag, so you can just pull out one egg at a time when you need it. Or if you know that you have a set recipe that you always use, like a quiche where you say you have 6 eggs that you always use, 6 eggs for your quiche because there's 4 of you and that works out perfectly. You can whisk the eggs, crack them all into a bowl, whisk them, freeze that liquid, and then use that liquid when you want to cook later. And like I say, that's great for baking, not so great for if you're trying to fry eggs or anything like that. They go rubbery and it doesn't work. Now, another method is one that I have tried and I can vouch for it. I did not believe it, but I absolutely can vouch for it. Water glassing. Water glassing is a traditional homesteading method of storing eggs, and it's essentially unwashed eggs, so they have to be unwashed. You want them as fresh as possible, and then you submerge them into lime water. Now the lime, and I'll have to put the link to the one that I got, it's calcium, they call it calcium sulfurate or something like that. It's not bicarbonate, but it's something like that. It's commercial edible lime, like it's not toxic to humans. So we're not talking about the lime that they sprinkle on agricultural ground to balance out the soil health. We're talking about lime that's used for preserving. It is specifically used for preserving. Now, eggs submerged and kept submerged in that water can last up to a year. And we did try it, and we cracked the eggs open, and look, they didn't look fresh and fantastic, but they were fresh. We did a float test. They did not float to the surface. And they They tasted fine. Neither of us got sick. Me and the handy helper tried it. I didn't want to do it on the kids just in case. But we tried it and it worked fine. So I think that's a really good way of doing it particularly if you're like us and you're off grid and you may not have the freezer space to freeze eggs. It's a good way of doing it where no power, no freezing, nothing else is required in order to store them. You're just storing them in a big jar of water, basically, that's had lime added. Dehydrating eggs. Now, if you have a dehydrator, fantastic. If you don't, you can still do it in your oven. We don't have a large oven here because we're off grid and ovens are a huge drain on power. So we have an air fryer and we have a small toaster oven for some things, and we cook on the wood stove during winter. But you can dehydrate just in a normal oven tray. Just make sure that it's even and there's a nice thin layer, and you have to have your oven on for a very long time at a very low heat in order to dehydrate. I think if you were dehydrating massive amounts of eggs, you're probably better off going with a proper dehydrator, and it would have its own set of instructions on how to dehydrate eggs. But the idea is that you whisk them or scramble them, make them mix together first. Don't try and do it as a whole egg, and then dehydrate them. And then once they're dehydrated, then you can blend or break them up so that they're in powder form, and you could use them for baking or camping. Now, you would have to work out how many eggs you've got, and then work out based on weight how much one egg's worth of the dehydrated powder is in order to use it for cooking. But certainly if you had a dehydrator, and I always joke and say I'm going to get a dehydrator one day, but the dehydrator I want is like $2,000, and the handy helper said no. He put his foot down. He's mean. So I don't have a dehydrator yet. One day. Now, the other thing with a glut is share the egg wealth. If you have a glut of eggs, bartering, gifting to neighbours, family, friends, trading with other gardeners who like other people in your area who maybe are growing something that you don't grow but you'd like, swapping out eggs with them, it would be an awesome way of doing it. We did used to barter our eggs a bit, and then we went from bartering to selling. Now, the reason that we stopped bartering is because we found that we weren't eating as many vegetables because we kind of went a bit keto and a bit carnivore. We weren't eating as many vegetables, and it was just easier for us to go, okay, who wants to buy eggs? Now, that being said, you wouldn't have to swap just for veggies. You could swap eggs out for honey, for somebody who might be down the road making sourdough bread, fruit. It could even be a case of animal feed. If somebody says, I've got a spare bag of chicken feed, I'll swap you some cartons of eggs for chicken feed. And that way you're covering your costs of producing those eggs. Now, selling eggs. And this is the tricky bit because this has changed. It used to be that if you weren't selling more than, I think it was 360, is that divisible by 12? It was a certain number of cartons. If you weren't selling, might have been, I don't know. I keep thinking 144, but it wasn't 144 cartons, and it certainly wasn't 144 eggs. It was like 300 eggs a week, because I remember looking at it and thinking, oh my God, we're never going to get to that point of selling 300 eggs a week. The limit used to be that if you were selling 300, I think it was 360 eggs a week, then you had to register and you had to notify that that's what you were doing. Now, I've recently been given some information by somebody who lives in my area to say that that law has changed. And it drives me insane. We are such a nanny state at the moment in Australia. They want to monitor every single thing you do. I mean, we still can't buy raw cow's milk, which does my head in. You can buy raw goat's milk, but you can't buy raw cow's milk. It makes 0 sense. But we're such a nanny state that they've now stepped in and gone, no, if you're selling a certain number of eggs now, you also have to be registered. And that certain number of eggs is any number of eggs. So at the moment, our girls are in a lull. We haven't been selling eggs, but I will need to register before we start selling again. I'm not prepared to risk getting in trouble and getting a fine because I'm a tight ass and I'm not going to give the government any more money than I have to. I don't think they do a very good job of spending my money as it is, so I'm certainly not going to increase what I give them. So I will register, and my understanding is the registration process is completely free, but you do have to register to say that you are selling eggs. So before the lull breaks, we will be doing that to make sure that we're doing everything correctly so we don't cop a fine. But it really is a bit of a joke that, I have 2 customers that I sell to. I've sold to them for 4 or 5 years. I've sold to other people as well, but these 2 customers have been with me for a very long time, and neither of them have ever had a problem with the eggs. We have a very open line of communication. If there was a bad egg in there, they'd let me know. None of them have ever got sick from eating our eggs. So the fact that we have to now monitor and trace and record where the eggs are coming from just seems a bit of overkill, but it is what it is, and we're just going to toe the line. But when you're thinking about selling cartons, so obviously register. Check your legislation in your area. So in New South Wales, and I think most parts of Australia, we now have to register. If you're overseas, check your local legislation to see whether or not you have to register before you sell. But friends and co-workers are great people to sell to, and don't be embarrassed to ask for money for a carton of eggs. If I haven't said it before, I am a huge fan of Denise Duffield-Thomas, who teaches people all about money mindset. And too often, people have goods for sale and they're afraid to ask for money, or they think they're asking too much, or they don't want to ask their friends or co-workers for money. If that item is an item that you could sell in the shop and a complete stranger would pay for it, of course you can ask for money of friends and co-workers. Nothing is free in this world, really, we should never be embarrassed saying, it cost me X amount of dollars to produce this carton of eggs, so this is how much I need to charge to recoup my costs. At least, at the bare minimum. Our egg cartons at the moment sell for $8.50 a carton, which is cheap because the 2 customers I've had for ages, and it's just easy to keep it at that price. If I was taking my eggs to the markets to sell them, I would not be selling them under $10 a carton if I was taking them to the markets. And it would be a case of like it or lump it. That's the price, $10. Not because I'm trying to make millions. Believe me, at $10 a carton, I won't be making millions. At $8.50 a carton, I only just cover costs. At $10, I would not be making millions. I would be covering costs if I had to then go and set up a stall at a markets and pay the market holder fee. $10 is the going rate for pasture-raised carton of eggs. Simple as that. So don't be afraid to put your hand out and say, I do have eggs, but I sell them. And just put it that way. They can either choose not to buy them or they can choose to buy them. That is 100% their choice. If they don't want to buy them, if they'd rather go and buy ones from the shops that aren't pasture-raised, well, that's on them. And you can do like a farm gate system if you're on a small farm or anything and you have a main road that comes past. Unfortunately, I have seen some horror stories where people have come in and just taken cartons of eggs and walked off without paying. So if you do that, if you're in a situation where you can have a camera or some kind of monitor down there so that you can see who's coming to the shop, and just put a little sign up saying, smile, you're on camera. Simple. So farm gate system could work too. Now, you may not want to sell the eggs just as is. You might be a bit of a chef or somebody who wants to value add to get a bit more money out of it. And again, check your local regulations in your area to make sure that you can have a home kitchen to do those kinds of things. But obviously baked goods come to mind, so cakes, muffins, things like that. Pasta. One of my old customers, he used to buy 2 cartons of eggs every month for his wife. His wife was Croatian, and she used to make the meanest pasta. Like, it was just delicious. But she would just make a big batch of pasta once a fortnight and then either freeze or air dry and have that pasta sitting there to use for dinners. So pasta's a good one for using up eggs. And I forgot to mention that before, but yeah, pasta is good for eggs. Custard. Now, again, if you're making any kind of food that's for human consumption, you need to check the regulations in your area and make sure that you are doing everything above board as far as health and safety, because we don't want anybody getting sick. Um, Now, when people get chickens, nobody really believes that they're going to end up with this massive glut. But I will post this week what our dining room table looked like at one of the worst points of a glut for us, and you will be surprised. We had so many eggs. I honestly, I was ringing everybody I knew, going, "Does anybody need eggs?" I was prepared to give them away at that point. We had so many, and that's when I lime glassed or water glassed some eggs so that we could get rid of some that way. I think we put 50 in total. They're all gone now, but we'll do it again. Now we've just gone through a lull again, and with me with my broken legs, still haven't been able to do stuff. But next time they start laying, we're going to have to, once they get into their glut period again, I will water glass some more. But nobody goes into it thinking they're going to go into that kind of glut, but it will catch up with you. It's like growing tomatoes and you put in more plants than you think you need because you think, oh, one or two will die or something like that, or birds will get some of the fruit off it. And then all of a sudden you have like 10 kilos of tomatoes and you're thinking, shit, I have no clue what I'm going to do with these tomatoes. When you have that many tomatoes, make tomato paste or tomato sauce or tomato bolognese sauce or whatever it is you like. But what was I going to say? I've lost my train of thought now. If you can sell some, if you can barter some, definitely do that. If you're prepared to try water glassing or lime glassing, I would say go ahead and do that. And I'll try in the show notes, I'll try and put down what the actual chemical name is of the lime that's edible lime, that's human consumption lime, so that you can have a look at for yourself of what you need. And just remember, use as many eggs as you can, like in cooking and everything like that. Oh, one last thing I forgot. Oh my God, I can't believe I nearly forgot it. The last one, which doesn't apply for everybody, but if you have a glut of eggs and you have a rooster, then you have one more thing up your sleeve that you can do to get rid of your glut of eggs. Incubate them. Hatch out babies, hatch out day olds. You do run the risk of getting 50% roosters and 50% hens, or sometimes even more roosters. But if you've got eggs that you know are fertile, the hen has been in with a rooster the entire time, and I would always say grab the freshest of the eggs to put in an incubator. You can either hire an incubator, you can buy an incubator, you can ask around your neighbourhood and see if you can borrow an incubator. Have a go at hatching some eggs out, some chickens out. It's honestly, if you've got kids, it's the best fun in the world. They will sit and watch, and it takes about an hour or two for an egg to crack open and the chick to come out. But it's a great way to tie up kids watching it. I videoed it years ago. I left my phone on fast forward, time lapse, and videoed a chick coming out of the egg. So it only goes for like 2 minutes, but it actually took like over an hour. But if you have a glut of eggs and they are fertile eggs, you can sell fertile eggs to other people with incubators. You can incubate them yourself and hatch out day olds. It's a great way to get rid of a few. And certainly we've done it when we've had a clucky chicken. So when goat chicken went clucky, we were in a period of glut with our eggs, and I just grabbed all the blue eggs. I think I put 12 blue eggs under it because I figured if she hatches out of Arakan, that'd be wonderful. She hatched out 8 out of 10. So that was a pretty good run. Actually, I think she hatched out 9, but we had to dispatch one. It wasn't well, so we put out of its misery. Anyway, so next time you go up to the coop and you have way more eggs than you know what to do with, that's a good list for you to come back to. And don't panic. Just kind of methodically go through and think, what's the best thing I could do? Now, if you are already a chicken keeper and you understand exactly where I'm coming from when I say the worst glut you've ever had, post your photos to Mojo Homestead, like link us in and say, this is the most amount of eggs that I've ever had, because I'm going to post my photo that I have with the dining room table completely covered in them, because I would love to see that I'm not just the only one who cops like way too many eggs at times. Anyway, next week, I think we're talking about chicken problems and fixes, and it's not going to be an in-depth health one. We've done in-depth health ones before. This is more the basics. If you're new to chicken keeping and there's a few problems that are really common problems that you're not sure about, that's what we're going to discuss next week. Anyway, that is it for me for now. I will talk to you all next week. Bye for now. Well, that's it for today's episode of Ditch the Store. If you're loving the journey to self-sufficiency, be sure to subscribe. You can also leave a review for us or share this episode with a friend who's ready to break up with their supermarket. If you've got questions or success stories, we'd love to hear about them on the socials. You can also find me at www.mojohomestead.net. Until next time, keep raising, growing and making. And remember, life's too short for store-bought eggs.